Serbs in the diaspora helped in the publication of Nikolai's books.
The Holy Bishop Nikolai was undoubtedly one of the brightest stars in the heavens of Serbian history. Prota Milica Protic, of blessed memory, spent 40 years collecting the works of Bishop Nikolai with the desire that they be published on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of his ordination to the priesthood. This did not come to pass, and he jealously guarded them. When atheism came to our land, Bishop Nikolai became, as a religious thinker, a persona non grata. Publication of his works was banned, and Milica kept them hidden. When I was elected Bishop of Western Europe, he said to me, "Vladika, you are going to the free world. I will give you all that I have collected of Bishop Nikolai's. Publish it somewhere in the West." I had to carry a little at a time, so that it was not found and confiscated at the frontier. When I had taken out about half of it, he became rather ill. He called me and said, "Just in case, God forbid, of anything happening to me, I have made 3 copies of all his works. One copy is built into the wall of my bedroom, behind this wardrobe. One is in the bell tower of the church in Mirjevo, and one is in the Vujan monastery. So if they find and destroy one of them, I know where the others are."
Although in Serbia there were continued attacks on Bishop Nikolai as a heretic, reactionary, Mason, British or German agent, and even, when necessary, enemy of the people and reactionary, they only drew forth from the devout people an even stronger love for the bishop and sense of his holiness.
Even during his life, the Serbian people considered the Holy Bishop Nikolai to be a saint. This was especially so after his death. The Serbs began to venerate him as a saint and to invoke him in their prayers, particularly in the dioceses of Šabac and Valjevo. But what can be reckoned to be Bishop Nikolai's first proclamation as a saint, and this was what it was called for a long time in our diocese, took place on March 18th, 1987, in the Cathedral Church in Šabac. Bishop Jovan, his nephew, was present at the Holy Liturgy, and the Holy Episcopal Liturgy was celebrated by Amphilochius, the then Bishop of Vršac, or rather Banat. In the presence of a church full of the devout, both clergy and people, the icon of the Holy Bishop Nikolai was brought into the church and the first Holy Liturgy was celebrated. With the blessing of Bishop Stefan of Žiča, we desired, before he was officially included in the diptychs of the saints of the Serbian Orthodox Church, to celebrate the liturgy to the glory of God and with his name. We were urged on by the sense that we had the right, before the official proclamation, to glorify the saint whose holiness was spreading abroad during his lifetime here in his centers of Žiča and Kraljevo.
The first frescoes and icons of the Holy Bishop Nikolai were begun.
Then, when we came to our church, the Cathedral of Christ's Resurrection, where we are now, I see the large icon of him on the holy table. It is really big, so big. And I sit down and think, Lord God, look now at this saint. How many times did I receive him into my house, and how many meals did I prepare? Is it possible?
Finally, in May 1991, Bishop Nikolai's relics, which had lain in the monastery of St. Sava in Libertyville for 35 years, set out on their journey to Serbia. A great many Serbs in America and Canada took a tearful leave of the relics of their bishop.
We are here at Surčin Airport in Belgrade, where, in 1991, the plane landed bearing the relics of our Holy Bishop Nikolai. who was arriving here in his fatherland for the first time after his long exile in America, where he had lived and where he died. He lived among us Serbs in America like a holy prophet, as the personification of the spirit of Saint Sava, as a living incarnation of all that is good in us Serbs, in our holy Orthodox faith. Even the Americans said of him that he is a second Isaiah, that he is a new prophet of the Church of Christ, living among us.
But at Surchin Aerodrome in Belgrade, there were only a few hundred people awaiting his arrival. In front of the church of St. Sava, on the Vracha plateau, there were 2,000 or 3,000. At Žiča, only just over 1,000. Only in the bishop's village of Lelic on May the 12th did he receive a magnificent welcome. About 30,000 people were gathered there from every corner of Serbia.
Anyone who was present that day in the monastery of Lelic will never forget it. To begin with, the whole Serbian people were gathered that day at Lelic, and the hearts of all who did reverence to the holy Bishop Nikolai were utterly filled with love for our holy bishop, a son of the Valjevo area. It was so moving and touching a sight to see the columns of people who that day poured into Lelic, and most especially when his relics arrived at the monastery, when everyone fell to their knees, reminding us of the unforgettable reception of the relics of the holy Prince Lazar when they travelled around Serbia at about the same time.
The Serbian people was at that time entering into a great time of trial. The new government, although it was for strategic reasons tolerating the Church, had not heard or understood the messages that many years before Bishop Nikolai had confided to the future. There were not many Serbs who heard and understood it.
Yugoslavia signified spite against Christ, spite against Saint Sava, spite against Serbianism, spite against the history of the Serbian people, the wisdom of the people and the people's integrity, spite against every one of the nation's holy treasures, spite and only spite. At the moment of the fall of communism, weapons will immediately be acquired by the Croats. And what do the Serbs think? They will think, as in 1918, that it is first necessary to call elections. Abandon the preposterous joke that one man will build a future happy Serbia. Every leader of a baptized people who, rejecting Christ, desires to bring happiness to his people, leads his people not to the land of happiness, but to the never land, inevitably and inescapably. The murderers and tyrants, who at other times retreated in terror, through darkness and tight places, have now become leaders of the leaders and princes of the princes. Indeed, they will not consume their wealth in peace, but will squander it in memorial wakes for their kinsfolk. They will dream of deceptive and devastating uprisings, and they will leap up at midnight, terrified and sweating. Their life will be long, that their punishment may be even longer. It will be worse for their people which gave birth to them than for the Jewish people, for they had the example of the Jewish people and did not learn from it. They will hearken to calumny of their name and will not dare to peer out of the window. They will look on their people enslaved in great lines and will be afraid for themselves. And they will listen, in dreams and in waking, to the cursing of their name, and they will tremble but will not be able to die. Thus a nation of sinners will stand up together like grass to kill God. And the knife that they raised against God will slip, and they will stab themselves in the heart.
Of course, people are not always willing to listen to prophets. Attacks on Nikolai continued on all sides whenever anyone recognized himself in his words, just as it was with the prophets of the Old Testament. From the flood of the most inspired prophetic words with which Nikolai reprimanded both his own people and other nations when they forgot God, his present-day enemies would single out several lines which they would reckon to be sufficient indictment. Nikolai, a reactionary, an anti-Semite. It could quietly be said that the prophet Jeremiah was a greater anti-Semite than he was.